As you're starting out your pelvic floor and core foundations program, I always think it's important to start with a comprehensive educational foundation so that you feel empowered and knowledgeable about your own body. Fun or not so fun fact. Research shows that more than 50% of women do not know the difference between a vagina and a vulva. It's okay if you're one of them. I just say this to iterate that it's important that we start with kind of the basics and just go over things so that you have a good understanding of your anatomy and physiology. It helps us to get the best results from your program. Oftentimes we don't pay attention to this region of the body until something is really going wrong, and then we feel really clueless and lost. So this is an empowering exercise just to understand and know what I'm talking about, have some background. It's also important to get effective results because when you know the terminology and you have this understanding, you can better understand the why behind our treatment strategy. You also have better body awareness, and so you can more effectively perform the exercises. It's really helpful. So let's dive in. We'll start with basic anatomy of the bony pelvis. The pelvis is formed by two sides or pairs of the hips, which are called innominate, and the sacrum, and the coccyx in the back, the tailbone. The ischium is what we commonly refer to as the sits bones, and the pubis is at the front of the pelvis. The ilium is the hip bone. The pelvis articulates and is intimately responsible for stability of the spine and the extremities or the legs. Let's move on to soft tissue structures. The perineum refers to the soft tissue region, which is the inferior portion of the pelvic outlet. It connects to the passage of the reproductive tract, the urinary system, and the gastrointestinal system. So there's a lot going on. The perineal structures that we'll talk about along the way through your program are really important. So let's talk starting from the outside in, if you can visualize that perspective. From the outside, we find the labia, which are the lips on the outside of the pelvic floor. This is where you would find external skin or hair on an adult. Inside of the labia, we see the vulva, and this is your external genitalia. It's important to know that the labia looks very different in person to person. Inside of the vulvar tissue, we see the vagina and the opening called the introitus. The structures of the pelvic floor, looking at it from front to back, we see another perspective. The top is the clitoris, moving down the urethra where urine comes out, the vaginal opening, and the perineal body. The space between the vaginal opening and the anus is the perineal body, and this area oftentimes is a little firmer and fleshy when we touch it. It sits directly between the two sits bones or ischial tuberosities here. It's important because it's often a site of common tearing with a vaginal delivery. So now what is the pelvic floor? The pelvic floor refers to a group of muscles that sit at the bottom of the pelvis like a hammock. In this model, everything here in red is musculature and it's part of the pelvic floor. There are 3 layers to the pelvic floor. Layer 1 is most superficial, and layer 2 is called the urogenital diaphragm. It makes up this kind of diamond shape when we look externally. Layer 1 and layer 2 are important for closing and opening the holes of the urethra, the vagina, and the anus. Now layer 3 is the deepest part or deepest layer of muscles, and it's responsible for supporting the pelvic organs. We see the uterus, the bladder, and the rectum. Now we'll go over the 5 primary functions of the pelvic floor, which are support, sphincteric, sexual, stability, and sump pump. Support refers to the fact that the pelvic floor, specifically those 3rd layer deepest muscles, support and hold up the pelvic organs, preventing prolapse and other signs of pelvic heaviness or bulging. Sphincteric role refers to keeping holes closed when we want them closed to avoid issues like leaking urine, stool, or gas, and open when we want them open to allow for full and complete voiding of urine and stool, and also pain-free penetration for things like vaginal exams, inserting tampons, and intercourse. Sexual function refers to the fact that the pelvic floor muscles, along with the clitoris here, are important for you to experience pleasure. We know that painful penetration and inability to achieve orgasm are signs of pelvic floor dysfunction. Sump pump. This is probably a new one for most people, and it refers to the way that the muscles of the pelvic floor contract and relax to help to move fluid, lymphatic fluid, and swelling. Think about it. This is important following a delivery, whether it's a vaginal or a C-section, in helping to reduce swelling. in helping to improve circulation and promote healing of that whole region of the abdomen and the pelvic floor. A side note, the pelvic floor is also really important for posture and breathing, and we'll get to this later down the road in your program, but just want to mention it here. Common dysfunctions that I will be screening for and wanting to look out for are urinary leakage, pain in the lower back, the hips, the pelvis, pain with intercourse, leaking, constipation, urgency of urinating, needing to go all the time, or frequency. Please leave a comment here in this task or send me a message if you have any questions about this information. My goal is for you to feel fully informed and have a great understanding as your body as we begin this journey.